From a scrawny kid swinging a bamboo sword at a dojo to a demon-like swordsman capable of scarring the strongest creature alive, Roronoa Zoro's evolution throughout One Piece is one of the most satisfying power progressions in all of anime. These are all of Zoro's forms and evolutions, from beginning to end. Now Zoro's story starts long before he ever met Luffy. As a child, Zoro trained at a dojo in Shimotsuki village under a swordsman named Kushiro, and he was good, really good for his age, but there was one person he could never beat, no matter how many times he tried. Kuina, Kushiro's daughter. She defeated Zoro over 2,000 times in a row. 2,000. And after their 2001st fight, the two of them made a promise under the stars. One of them would become the greatest swordsman in the world. But then Kuina died. She fell down a staircase, and just like that, the girl who could beat Zoro 2,000 times was gone. Zoro took her sword, the Wado Ichimonji, and swore on her memory that he'd fulfill their promise. He would carry her dream with his own. And from that day forward, Zoro fought with 3 swords, one in each hand, one clenched in his teeth. Because that's the kind of person Zoro is. Before joining Luffy, Zoro made a name for himself as a bounty hunter so dangerous that Marines called him the Pirate Hunter. He was captured at Shell's Town only because he made a deal to protect a little girl from a corrupt Marine captain's son. When Luffy found him, he was tied to a post, starving, and still terrifying everyone around him. At this point, Zoro carried Wado Ichimonji and 2 unnamed blades. He was strong, absolutely, but he was still human, still limited, still just a very talented swordsman in the weakest sea. East Blue Zoro is where we see the foundation. He defeats Kabaji with a wound that should have killed him. He fights the Nyaban brothers while exhausted. He beats Hachen at Arlong Park with 3 swords despite being sliced nearly in half by Mihawk just days earlier. And speaking of Mihawk, that fight at the Baratie is the single most defining moment in Zoro's entire journey. He challenges the world's strongest swordsman, knowing he can't win, and Mihawk defeats him with a tiny knife. A knife. Zoro gives everything he has, throws his strongest attack, and Mihawk breaks 2 of his swords like they were nothing. But Zoro doesn't turn around. He opens his arms wide and takes a slash across the chest, because a swordsman who shows his back is a disgrace. And after nearly dying, he raises Wado Ichimonji to the sky and makes his vow to Luffy. He will never lose again. And guys, the crazy thing is, he pretty much keeps that promise for the entire series. At Logtown, Zoro picks up 2 new swords, Sandai Kitetsu, a cursed blade that he tests by throwing it in the air and letting it fall toward his arm, basically daring fate to take his hand off. It misses. And Yubashiri, a light and fast blade gifted to him by an impressed shop owner. With his new loadout, Grand Line Zoro begins his real evolution. The first massive power jump comes in Alabasta. Zoro fights Mr. One, Daz Bones, a man who can turn his entire body into steel blades, and Zoro literally cannot cut him. Every attack bounces off, he's getting sliced up, bleeding everywhere, on the verge of death. And in that moment, Zoro has a breakthrough. He remembers his master's words about a swordsman who can cut anything, even steel, and a swordsman who can cut nothing, not even paper. He learns to hear the breath of things, and in one clean strike, he cuts Mr. One clean through. Steel. This is Zoro learning to cut what couldn't be cut before, and it's a concept that defines his entire fighting philosophy going forward. In Skypiea, Zoro goes up against Brahim and Ohm, and we start seeing his attacks get more refined. Techniques like 108-pound Phoenix show that Zoro can project cutting force through the air, hitting enemies from a distance. This is a swordsman who's no longer just swinging steel at close range. He's turning air pressure into a weapon. And throughout the Long Ring Long Land arc and early interactions with Admiral Aokiji, Zoro starts to understand something critical. The Grand Line has threats that pure swordsmanship can't overcome. He's going to need something more, something beyond technique. Enies Lobby is where the next game-changing form debuts. During his fight against Kaku, one of the CP9 assassins who ate the ox fruit and turned into a giraffe, Zoro is pushed to his absolute limit, and then something terrifying happens. Zoro manifests Ashura. 3 heads, 6 arms, 9 swords. A demonic illusion that surrounds his body and allows him to attack with triple the force. Nobody, not even Zoro, fully understands what Ashura is. Some people think it's a manifestation of his willpower. Some think it's connected to his lineage. But whatever it is, it one-shots Kaku. This is the first time Zoro displays a power that goes beyond pure swordsmanship, and it won't be the last. But if Ashura is Zoro's most mysterious form, then what happens at Thriller Bark is his most iconic moment as a character. After the crew defeats Gecko Moria and his massive zombie oars, the warlord Bartholomew Kuma shows up. And Kuma offers a deal. He'll spare the crew if someone takes all of Luffy's accumulated pain and fatigue. Zoro volunteers. Kuma extracts all of Luffy's suffering into a compressed ball of pure agony, and Zoro steps into it. When Sanji finds him later, Zoro is standing in a pool of his own blood, the ground around him painted red, barely conscious. Sanji asks what happened, and Zoro says 3 words that became legendary. Nothing happened. He also gains Shusui during this arc, the black blade of the legendary samurai Ryuma, which he takes after defeating Ryuma's reanimated corpse. This sword gives Zoro a massive offensive boost and a permanent connection to the land of Wano. After the crew gets separated at Sabaody by Kuma, Zoro lands on Kurigana Island, which happens to be Dracule Mihawk's home. And here's the thing. Zoro, the proudest swordsman alive, the man who would rather die than show his back, gets on his knees and begs Mihawk to train him. For 2 years. And whatever happened during that training gave Zoro the scar over his left eye and turned him into an absolute monster. Post-time skip Zoro casually one-shots enemies that would have given him serious trouble before. He demonstrates armament Haki for the first time, coating his swords in invisible armor. He slices the massive stone body of Pika in Dressrosa like it was nothing. The gap between pre- and post-time skip Zoro is enormous, but Wano is where Zoro reaches a level that puts him among the strongest fighters in the entire world. First, he trades Shusui for Enma, one of 2 swords that belong to the legendary Kazuki Oden, the only man who ever scarred Kaido. Enma is a monster of a weapon. It forcefully drains the user's Haki against their will, making it incredibly difficult to control. Most swordsmen can't even hold it without losing all their strength. But Zoro manages it. And then comes the rooftop. During the Onigashima raid, Zoro stands on top of Onigashima alongside Luffy, Law, Kid, and Killer, facing both Kaido and Big Mom. 2 emperors of the sea. And Zoro does the unthinkable. He uses Ashura in combination with Enma and launches an attack that leaves a permanent scar on Kaido's body. Kaido himself, the dragon who's been called invincible, acknowledges that Zoro is using Conqueror's Haki, the same type of Haki that only 1 in a million people are born with. But the peak, the absolute peak of Zoro's power so far, comes during his fight against King the Lunarian. King is first commander of the Beast Pirates, a member of the near-extinct Lunarian race who can switch between a state of invulnerability and a state of incredible speed. Zoro can't figure out the pattern. He's getting beaten, running out of time, and Enma is draining him dry. And then Zoro makes a decision. Instead of fighting Enma's pull, he lets it take everything. He pours all of his Haki, every last drop, into all 3 swords simultaneously. Wado Ichimonji, Sandai Katetsu, Enma, all 3 coated in Conqueror's Haki at the same time. This is the King of Hell 3-sword style. And it is devastating. Zoro figures out King's invulnerability pattern, waits for the exact moment his flames go out, and cuts him down with a single, massive strike. It's the strongest Zoro has ever been. And after the fight, he sees a hallucination of the Grim Reaper, which many believe was death itself coming to collect on the price of using that much power. At Egghead Island, Zoro fights Rob Lucci, the same CP9 assassin who pushed Luffy to his absolute limit at Enies Lobby, and handles him with relative ease using King of Hell style. This tells us something important. Zoro is still growing. He hasn't mastered Enma completely yet. He hasn't turned it into a permanent black blade, which is the next level of sword mastery, and he still hasn't had his rematch with Mihawk. Everything we've seen so far is building toward that fight. The kid who lost 2,000 times in a row became a man who refuses to lose even once, and every scar, every blade, every form along the way was earned through blood, willpower, and a promise he made under the stars to a girl who isn't here to see him keep it. But did you ever wonder what would happen if Zoro's captain was reborn with all his memories and could change the entire One Piece story from day one? Well, you can click on this video right here to find out. Go on, click it.